Welcome to the Nurturing Greatness podcast. If you are completely satisfied with the education landscape as it is now, this podcast is not for you. But if you are ready for change and you're motivated to disrupt the current system, then we encourage you to keep listening. This podcast will explore what it truly means to cultivate brilliance in ourselves, in our students, and in the systems we lead. I'm Dr. Tanya Breland.
And I'm Dr. Erica Leek. And together with through the Nurturing Greatness movement, we are committed to high expectations, asset-based leadership, and creating environments where every single learner is seen, challenged, and affirmed. In each episode, we sit down with leaders, educators, and change agents who are committed to doing the deep work of transformation. Today, we have the Dr. Donovan Smalls II. Is that right? The second?
Yes,
Got
yes,
it.
yes.
Okay. Okay. So Dr. Smalls empowers educators and aspiring school leaders to unlock their full potential. With 13 years of teaching and leadership experience, and now in his fourth year, is that right, as an assistant principal?
Yes,
Yes. He has
yes.
transformed instructional practices, strengthened school culture, and built high performing, equity focused teams. That's what we're talking about.
That's right. Absolutely. He is also an interim principal right now. Can I say
Yes.
that?
Yes, yes.
Because that's pretty exciting. He
It
is the
is.
best. He is also a best-selling author of Beyond the Classroom and host of the Aspiring School Leader podcast. Dr. Smalls is committed to developing the next generation of leaders who serve with clarity and confidence. He serves on the executive board of the NABSE New Jersey, and he holds a doctorate in educational leadership from Drexel University. To begin our conversation, I'd like to ask you, Donovan, because you said we could call you Donovan.
Yes.
I'd like to I'd like to ask you, who first nurtured greatness in you?
Well, first off, thank you for having me. I truly appreciate the opportunity to join the Nurturing Greatness podcast. Um, I think the first couple of people I'd say who nurtured greatness in me are my parents. My dad, Donovan Sr., my mom, Jackie, always saw leadership qualities in me, and she saw me being an educator, especially from my love for sports. And I majored in health and physical education, which then turned into me being a health and PE teacher. And that's kind of what started my journey, but I'd say it definitely started with my parents.
Yeah, I love the parents. Gotta love the parents because they do great things and they really do
They
see
do.
us. So go ahead, Dr. Erica.
Yes, shout out to the parents out there. So when you hear the phrase nurturing greatness, like what does it mean to you in practice? Not theory, but what does it mean to you in practice?
It means understanding that everyone has greatness within them, and it is our responsibility as leaders to pull it out. So, what that means is practically having conversations with teachers, with leaders to see what it is that they want to do with their lives and then helping them along that path toward getting there. And so I think practically it's just constantly having real conversations with people, not making it about me, but making it about them. And then noticing the things that they do well, because, often we don't really see what we do well, right? It often takes somebody else to see the greatness that we have within us. And so I think it's calling it out when we see it and then continuing to provide professional development or the levels of support that are needed for them to be their best.
So you know what I like? I like how you focused on the staff. So typically people go right to the kids, but the adults also need that same kind of nurturing. They need us to see them. They need to see us to see the gifts and the talents that they have and to nurture that greatness that's inside of them. So I love that you started with that, with the adults. So now can you answer the same question for kids?
I think it's similar with kids. I think, when we see students who are often being labeled or doing things that are not necessarily within their character, right? I think it's sitting them down, having conversations. Let's get to the root of why these behaviors are happening and then calling them up, right? I'm a
Mhm.
firm believer in coaching people up and calling them up to where they are supposed to be and what we know their potential is. And so when it comes to students, everybody is not great at everything. But
Right.
I do think that as leaders, we need to be people who are seeing that a child is athletically gifted and not necessarily pushing them toward being a phenomenal athlete, but what could you do as a coach to help other people? Or what could you do as a general manager, right? These different aspects of greatness that our students possess, they
Mhm.
don't always have to be um, they don't always have to be these things where they're looked at as a negative, but how do we spin it and look at things as a positive?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And
I
thanks
love
for responding to that question related to the kids, because I do think that's really important. Do you have a teacher that saw you and that nurtured greatness in you?
Absolutely. I can't say that there's one particular teacher, but I'd say my current or my principal at South Orange Middle School in Irby Hill, she was the one who saw leadership qualities in me to go on and get my admin certification and really look into being an educational leader. I think, as I spoke about earlier, it's not only do we need to, as leaders, like look at our own leadership qualities and continue to develop ourselves. It is our responsibility to be a developer of people. And
Mhm.
so she was the one who saw, hey, you do really well with kids. You're able to scale your level of impact with other people. And so why not think about becoming a school leader so that your impact can continue to grow, right? You can continue to call out the greatness in other people. And so I'd say she's probably that number one person that has me sitting in the seat that I'm sitting in now.
Isn't that awesome? I love that.
I love that. I mean, the power of mentorship, I think, is so crucial when it comes to kids, but also like young, members of the staff. Like, they need some guidance and they need like, what is the next step? Or I'm not sure if I'm going to be good at this. Like that, the power of mentorship and guidance, I think is I think understated. And
Mm.
so I really do love that. And like Tanya, I really appreciate your focus on nurturing greatness in the adults and in the kids in the building, right? Because we all have that greatness, and some of us have realized it, and some of us have yet to do so. And so
Right.
to have a leader that provides a safe space for you to sort of try some new things, or maybe I didn't get that quite right, and maybe I'll try it again or try something different, I think is really powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. So, what is one belief that you have about students or leadership that we need to release? Just get rid of it if we're to be serious about transformation.
Mm. That's a good question.
Mhm.
One thing,
One belief.
one belief I firmly think that, we often talk about being instructional leaders, right? And I think that that's important. I think that ultimately, if you're a building leader, you're going to be judged based on whether students are achieving at high levels.
Hmm.
But I think we miss the mark when we forget as leaders that we're in the people business. And I think that when it comes to being an instructional leader, it has to start with a relationship with teachers, and it has to be cultivated by me making sure that I am having conversations with teachers that keep their dignity, right? So if I'm seeing something that's not going well in a classroom, I have to remember that this is a person on the other side of the feedback that I'm giving.
Hmm.
So I have to be cognizant of how I'm giving that feedback. And I'm not saying we need to sugarcoat anything, but if we're going to be instructional leaders, I think the belief that we need to adopt is that we have to lead this person first before instruction is going to change. And I don't know if we talk about being leaders of people as much as we should, even though we're in the people business, right? I think we believe we lead people first, and then we lead instruction second.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
That is. So when we think about high expectations, because in the leading of, this staff person or this student, we have there's an expectation. There are expectations that we have, either professionally or academically or socially, that we really that we need them to meet. And so what does a high expectation look like without harm? And I think you started to talk about it, but what does when you think about high expectations, how do we sort of carry that out without harming the individuals that we have those expectations of?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when it comes to high expectations, I think we have to make sure that we're setting a standard and making sure that we're holding people accountable to that standard while also being equitable in the way that we carry that out, right? Because everyone has different skills, different life circumstances, particularly our kids. And we have to make sure that we are understanding them as individuals to really call out what that expectation is going to be, right? So everybody should have a standard of excellence and expectation of excellence, but how we carry that out without harm means that I'm, meeting them where they are. And then
Mhm.
I'm calling them up and I'm teaching them and I'm nurturing them to meet their individual expectation. I think
Mhm.
the harm comes in where we try to treat everybody the same. We try to adopt the word equality as opposed to equity, and we don't truly focus on them as an individual. And so, that could be as a school leader that often comes out in disciplinary actions, right? We know that suspensions don't necessarily cure anything,
Right.
but if we're not leading equitably, we would say, well, this is what the code of conduct says, and this is what I need to do. And that's where the harm comes in. And so I think, when it comes to discipline, when it comes to treating people fairly and equitably, I think that's the way that we prevent that harm.
Yeah. I can remember when I was a principal and the staff would send the kids to me for some infraction, usually it was nebulous. Okay. They may be watching. They weren't always nebulous. Sometimes they really were like, areas of concern. But I do know that what would rub them the wrong way is if I didn't punish the child that they sent down.
Mm. Yep.
So I had a different relationship with the children as the leader in the building. And I also was a different personality than everybody else in the building. So my personality is these are young children because they were elementary. There are teachable opportunities here, and we can teach what what kinds of behaviors we expect. Everything does not have to be warranted with a punishment. And
Hmm.
so when you were talking about, just using discipline as an example, it just reminded me of how they would get upset with me because they would feel like I didn't
Hmm.
have their back. And it wasn't that I didn't have their back, it's that the kid's best interest was really at play there. And helping that kid to understand the conduct and the consequences without always having to punish them could
Hmm.
also be effective. And that was like it was a paradigm, shift for people. They weren't really, that wasn't what they were accustomed to. And so that was something that was
Yeah.
really challenging,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah. That's
beginning in particular.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think during my first year as an administrator, that's also something that I had to understand, right? Sometimes a conversation is all a kid needs in order to change their behavior, right? And that's a consequence for them. But I think, Dr. Leek, that goes back to what you were saying. Without doing harm in enforcing a consequence means I have to know my kids.
Right.
And then when I know my kids, I also know, okay, which student needs a conversation and then they're fine, and what student needs a little bit more redirection with also introducing restorative practices, right? So I think it just depends on the situation. And as you mentioned, Dr. Breland, I think that there are people sometimes who don't truly know what it's like to be an administrator or a school leader. And so they want to project what they would do, not understanding that you're in the position for a reason because you understand and you have a different perspective on leadership. So, yeah, that was a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about shifting culture in schools, because you were talking about the example with the punitive versus restorative, but let's think more broadly when we think about shifting culture. What is a practice, just one practice that educators and or leaders could implement? I know it's spring break, but say tomorrow.
Mhm.
By the time this airs, it won't be spring break. So tomorrow, to change and shift the culture in the school.
I think, with all the responsibilities that school leaders have, I think the one way that you can shift the culture is thinking about visibility strategically, right? Strategic visibility. I'm big on that because yes, we have all of these responsibilities. However, I still need to make sure that tomorrow I'm checking in on a teacher, right?
Mm.
I'm going through classrooms just to say hi, just to say good morning. How's your day? That does go a long way. As much as we think that it could be taboo, I think that it's true, right? And I hear it from teachers oftentimes and from students, right? Like you come and you say hi to us. It's very simple, but
It
it
is.
makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something people can do tomorrow to truly begin to change the culture because it's building a culture of trust. And then when you build a culture of trust with your teachers, with your students, then when it's time to, let's say, make some sort of correction, then we can do that because you know that I'm not coming from a place of being punitive with you, right? I'm truly
Right.
trying to help because you understand me and I kind of understand you as well. Yeah.
I love that. Tanya and I have the just the opportunity to do walkthroughs in tons of schools. And one of the things that I always look for, particularly with kids, is the extent to which they're greeted by any adult
Mm,
in the building, right? So when I come into the classroom, do I get a hello or a good morning or a good
hmm.
afternoon? If I'm walking down the hall, are any of the adults greeting me?
Right.
And I think you're right. I think it absolutely goes a long way because I know how I feel when somebody says, "Hey, how you doing?"
Hmm.
It's like, "Oh, thank you, I'm good," or whatever.
Right.
Particularly if, maybe I don't know that person well, it's still it's almost an invitation to my space. Like, I'm glad
Hmm.
you're here. It's good to see you, And
Yeah.
so, but I think you're right. I think just the addition of a greeting, uh,
Right.
I think is so important. So as we're talking about nurturing greatness and cultivating brilliance,
Hmm.
what does that require of us as leaders? It's that cultivation of brilliance.
I think it begins with identifying the brilliance that exists in people. And then again, one of the things that I try to do is have some sort of calibration meeting with my teachers that I supervise. And what that means is we sit down, either it's during their pre-conference, before an observation, or after, typically because that is time that is protected, right? And so one thing that I do is just ask them about their goals. What is it that they want to do with their career, right? And so I try my best to really identify what they want to do, right? And from there, it becomes a conversation where I can identify that brilliance. And then let's say they want to become an administrator. How can I mentor them? Right. So right now I'm mentoring a couple of teachers because they want to become administrators. But I would have never known that if I didn't have that calibration meeting. And so I
Right.
think that's what it begins with. It begins with a conversation, and then it begins also with the follow through, right? We can't just have a conversation with no follow through. I have to make sure that I am, having some sort of measure to track and develop them strategically.
I
I'm curious.
really
Oh, go ahead.
love that. Go ahead. Go ahead,
No,
Tanya.
I was just curious when you do those calibration meetings, as you call them, would you say that people have been accustomed to that, or is that something that you do?
Um, I would say, I mean, based on the feedback, I think that it's something that I do. I heard someone previously mention that on a podcast that I was on that they found it to be successful. And so I tried it and adopted it, and they were grateful. The individuals who I speak with during these calibration meetings, they're grateful that I even asked, right? Because many times as leaders, sometimes it's kind of like, this is the initiative, this is what we're doing, and that's all we're going to talk about. But I think when we get to the heart of leadership, like I mentioned earlier, it's about people. And then when I'm having these conversations with people to truly understand who they are, their goals, that's truly what I think leadership is about, right? It's not
Hmm.
just about increasing student achievement, but how can I help a teacher reach their goal as well? Because if it didn't happen, if I don't do it now for other people, then I think I would not be an effective leader because somebody has done it for me.
Hmm.
I do love the concept of a calibration meeting. I just had this memory when I was teaching high school. I had a meeting with an administrator, and I was saying that I wish I knew more about literacy instruction. And so she arranged for me to take like a graduate level class in just that, in reading instruction. And my students, like at one point I was reading, I was doing something. And so I explained, one of my students asked me about like, well, what is that or something? And I said, well, I'm taking a class in literacy instruction because I want to be a better teacher, a better reading teacher. I'm a high school teacher, and we tend not to have these really solid literacy skills like elementary. And
Mhm.
so during the course of that semester, my students would be like, okay, what'd you learn? Like, okay, so, and I would say, okay, so here's a strategy and let's try it. And they'd be like, okay. And then they would rate it. Like, that didn't really work. Or, oh, I really like that. That really helps. And
Mhm.
I'm saying that to say that I think sort of the role of transparency is huge because it actually can, when you have these meetings, and you say like this is a space of learning, so I want you to feel free to learn something new or to go in a direction that you may want to go in. I think that brings the kids along too, if we're
Mhm.
transparent about what it is that we're doing. I think they see that lifelong learning is just that, like you don't get to a place where okay, we know it and we're good.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
love that, the creation of that atmosphere where if there's something you want to learn or try, go ahead and do it, because I think it creates a model for kids
Yeah.
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. And I
It
love that
also
you
open.
talked
No,
I
go
love
ahead.
that you talked about transparency, right? That's also another thing that I truly believe in as a leader. I think sometimes we try to be so stoic in terms of like we never make mistakes or we can't show our humanity. But I
Mhm.
disagree with that. I think
Yeah,
the transparency is what actually allows people to trust us and allows us to be effective leaders because they see, yes, this person made a mistake, but they owned up to it, or this person is true in what they say about helping me to develop. And I think, yeah, that transparency is critical.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I also think it just opens the door for you to really be able to nurture the greatness because there's that trust, there's that openness, there's that connection and relationship that allows you to be able to see that teacher that's in your office, you see them beyond what they're doing in front of the classroom. And then they're able to be open enough with you that, if they share something that you can't necessarily see, maybe you could see their leadership ability,
Right.
but maybe you don't know that's an aspiration that they have, except
Hmm.
that you've now opened this door. And so now here's your opportunity to nurture them.
Right.
And
Right.
and then hopefully it sets an example that when they do get in that leadership role, they do the same thing.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
agree.
good.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's good. This has been an awesome conversation.
It
I
goes by so
really love.
fast.
It
Yeah,
does.
it did go by. It did go by fast. But before we close out, before we go, can you let our listeners know, our viewers know, how people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm available on all social media platforms at Donovan Smalls, the number two. So if anyone would like to connect and, share ideas or anything, I also have a podcast, the Aspiring School Leader Podcast, which is on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and also Spotify.
Awesome.
I love that. I love that. And thank you again for joining us on this episode of the Nurturing Greatness podcast. This has been a really great conversation. And if this conversation challenged you, affirmed you, or gave you something practical to implement to all of our viewers, share it with a colleague and join the movement.
Yes. And again, I also want to say thank you so much for being here with us. And we're just looking forward to others being able to hear some of your leadership strategies that you use to nurture greatness. But for our listeners out there, please visit our website, nurturinggreatness.info, to join the Nurturing Greatness movement and explore our services, upcoming events, and resources designed to support your nurturing greatness journey. Until next time, keep nurturing greatness.